By talking about binary. We want to talk about binary because a lot of systems use binary. And hackers must be aware of binary counting. Binary counting goes like this. 1, 0, 1, 10, 11, 100, 101, 110, 111, 1000, 1001, 1010, 1011. We're basically doing the same thing that you do in normal counting. 0, 1, 2, and then you go to 9, and then it becomes 10, 11, 12, and then you go to 19, you get to 20. Every time you get to the max digit, which is 9, you have to advance and add a place. So every time you get to the max digit, which is like 9 in decimal, you have to advance, you advance the original place to 0, and then you go up 1 on the next place. And that's also why when you get to 199, what's next? Oh, sorry, when you get to 999, or 99 rather, when you get to 99, what happens? You advance the 9 to 0, you advance the other 9 to 0, and you add a place, 99 to 100. So if we go in binary, we get to a number like, let's say, 11. What comes after 11? Well, 1 is the maximum digit, so you go 0, and then the other one's also at max, so you go 0 and say 100. 101, 111, what would be next? You have to advance all the digits to 0. Basically, you're at the end, yeah, 1,000. So that's, and 1,001, right?
1,011, and then 1,100,
right.
and 1,101.
You got it. Okay, good, excellent, all right. So anyway, it may take a little practice.
Wait, so, I mean, all right. So if we were to just, all right.
What?
If the question was, like, what is the 30th binary number, you would have to do, like, all of them until 30 to figure it out. Is it easier way?
Yeah, you can use the bin function in Python.
And it's already in there, right? The bin function, but you don't have to install it?
No, you don't have to install it. Let's use the bin function.
All right, cool.
So as long as the concept is more or less clear, we can just use the binary converter. If you have to, now what we're writing right now is our own little app that will do binary conversions. And you could even save it, you know, and have it as a little utility if you wanted to. Now, you're in Python 2?
Python 3. And I have both, so I just run Python 3.
Or Python 2, right, either one. Okay. So you know that in Python 3, it looks like this, and in Python 2, it looks like this.
Input and run, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I've got that sheet as well, the Python 2 and 3 differences.
Okay, oh, good, good. Yeah, that's really, there's not that many differences, right? So this is Python 3, and this is Python 2.
So you talked about that in here.
Yeah, right. Ron put one of the major ones. Okay, so we want to enter a number. Now, what do we have to do to this number or to this value to get it to act like a number? Do you remember what raw input returns? This is a memorization thing. Returns a string, that's right. So if we wanted to convert it, do you remember how we can convert a string to an integer?
Yeah, convert it to an int. So a is equals to int and then num.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So I'll just say inum equals int of num. So that's going to get us the integer. And now we need to convert it to binary. We do that with the bin function.
Okay. So why didn't you do a print binary converter if we quickly just ask you?
Yeah.
Why online do you print binary converter? What does that do? Do we need to install that or is that?
Well, so let's break it out. You can see what print is. You know what print does?
Yeah.
Okay. And what kind of argument did I put into print?
That looks like quotes.
Quotes around it, that's right. What does that make it?
String. A string.
Makes it a string, that's right. All I'm doing is printing a string.
Huh?
All I'm doing is printing a string.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, I'm not calling any special functions or doing anything.
Right.
If I had, you'd see something new that you'd never seen before, like bin. You don't want to be thrown by the fact that I put stars there or did anything there, because that's just a string.
It's just something we just want to see on the screen.
Exactly, right.
All right.
So I just wanted to turn it into a little app, you know. All right. Are you guys using Python 2 right now? Okay, let's use Python 2. All right, so we're pulling this out, string. You're typing all this stuff out?
Yeah. I just gotta create some space to record the video. Where are your videos? Are you recording?
I'm recording this one. And you know what's happening with so you know raw input returns a string, right? And int's converting the string to an integer. And now we're converting it to a binary. So why don't we make this, why don't we say let's say in binary is. Oops, I need a second token. This is the format method. Let me test this to make sure it works. Python 2. 5. Okay. Sorry, hold on. So I may as well also mention that there are other bases that we should be aware of because they also show up in hacking. The bases that we know now is base 10, otherwise known as regular counting, right? Base 2, which is known as binary. Then there's also base 8 and base 16. And we call base 8 octal, and we call base 16 hexadecimal.
Okay, so base 10 is regular counting?
That's right.
Okay.
And we call that decimal.
I don't think they taught us this in math. I mean, I skipped college, I went to trade school.
Uh-huh.
So I did crazy math classes, but
Yeah.
like high school, they didn't.
I remember base 5 when I was a kid. You guys don't remember that? They never taught you base 5? I mean, obviously, for me, it was in the early 20th century. No, just kidding.
Well, so what are these bases used for in math? I mean, what would you use binary math for just computer stuff?
I don't know how you would use it in math
Right.
besides computer stuff. I think they just wanted to make us aware of what decimal was and how there are other ways to count. I don't know.
Okay.
Maybe they were just doing it in a way to make us think about numbers, differently than just regular counting. Because we all know decimal intuitively because we just memorized it,
Hey, can you scroll down a little bit?
Sure. So all I wanted to say was that, if you're in base 8, you should be able to use the same principles to count in base 8. It should be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 10. Does that make sense? The base is always the max value that you don't have a digit for. Like base 10, for example. There is no 10 digit, right? It's 1, 0. It goes 0 through 9, and then it goes 1, 0. Because you can never get to 10. There's no 10 digit. So octal is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 10.
That's 8.
Because there's no 8. Yeah, that's base 8.
How come in 10 there is a 10?
There is no character 10.
But it's 1, 0.
Right. And so what is it in octal? 1, 0.
1, 0 is 1, 0. Okay.
Yeah. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 0. Because there's no 8.
Okay.
And in decimal, the 10 base, there's no 10. You have to say 1, 0.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
So if you got to 17 and go
To
to 20.
17, you would go to 20. That's right. And when you got to 77, where would you go? What's that? No, you go to 100. You'd always jump the decimal. You'd jump the place one, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 1, 0. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 0. When you get to 99, where do you go from 99 in decimal? 1, 0, 0, right. So when you get to 77 in octal, 1, 0, 0, right. Then just flip the digits and add one, yeah. And then base 16 is the interesting one because base 16 actually has digits for 11 through 15. Those are A through F. In other words, you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, A, which represents 10, what would be 10 in decimal, B, C, D, E, F, and then 10. That's a little much, but it is important actually. We could turn this into a hex converter really easily. Let's do a hex converter. I'm just going to change. You can just watch me. If I wanted to convert in hex is base 16. So what did I say? I don't even know. I'm just guessing actually at the numbers, but I'm pretty sure that you could get to what? That 16 would be, well, what did I say? Oh, 11, no, 10 would be A. Let's try it. 10. 10 is A, right? 11 is B. And 15 is F. See, it says OX, that means hex. And 16 should be 10. Right. So anyway, you can use hex, bin, or oct. Oct would be your octal converter.
Okay, these converted again, they're already in there, right? You have these converted in the papers?
Then none of them are here.
Are they on your documents?
Octal is written by 0. They're in none of my documents, no. We have to write this down and take notes.
Okay.
The notes can be this. I guess a lot of systems use binary. Hackers must be aware of binary counting. In binary, there is only 1 and 0. When we get to 1, next number is 10. When we get to 11, next number is 100. So it goes 0, 1, 10, 11, whoops. 100, 101, 110, 1000. Oh, and 111, right, 1000.
Cool. So this is just binary. Do we need to know all other ones again? I'm a little kind of confused about that.
Okay.
Do we need to know all of them?
Well, binary is base what? What base what?
Binary? Okay, would it be base? Is that base 10?
No, decimal is base 10. That's the number counting system we use.
Base 10,
Yeah, binary is base 2.
Base 2, okay.
So binary is base 10. So if decimal is base 10, what's the maximum digit in one digit? What's the maximum number in one digit in base 10? 9.
No, yeah.
Right? And after 9, you advance the digit by 1 and say 0, right? 1, 0. So that's base 10.
That's base 2.
Right. So binary is base what?
Base 2.
Okay. So one thing you can think about is that the base number is the number you can never get to.
Okay, you can't get to 2.
Right, because in binary you only have 0 and 1.
Ah, okay.
And in decimal, base 10, you only have 0 through 9.
0 to 9.
There is no 10.
Okay.
And in binary, there's no 2.
Okay. There's no 2. Yep, definitely no 2. Right.
Right? So 0, 1, 10, and you were able to count in that, right?
That's what we do last.
So let's say base 8. In base 8, octal, there is no 8.
So 1 through 7.
1 through 7.
What will we use that for? Is this for like, again, comes back to IP addresses and stuff?
Yeah, stuff like that.
Okay.
Memory addresses on your computer or in hexadecimal. Base
So
6.
what will come after 16 in base 7? What will come after 6?
In base 7?
Yeah.
What would come after 6 in base 7? That's a good question.
Yeah.
What would come after 6 in base 7?
16.
What do we always do when we get to the max digit?
Oh, it would be 10.
10,
And then 11, 12, 13, 14, 15.
16.
16?
In base 7?
Oh, yeah, 16. All right.
Yeah.
So
16. And then what's after 16?
20.
20.
How about 18?
There's no 18 in base 7.
Oh, no 8s.
There's no 8s. There's no 7s.
6s, 7s, 8s, 8s, 9s.
There's a 6. There's a 6.
So there's 6s, right? There's 7s, 8s, 9s.
Right.
Good.
Now, nobody uses base 7 at all, but you can talk about base 7.
I don't think I just talked about
Yeah, exactly.
it. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Base whatever, it doesn't matter. In base 5, there's no 5,
Okay.
right?
Yep.
1, 2, 3, 4. What's after 4 in base 5? 10.
11, 12, 13.
What's in base 8? What's after what? In base 7, in base 8, after 7 is 10. What's after 77?
100.
100. So you got it.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then 120, and 1.
100, 106 goes to 110, right?
110?
Yeah, 100, 106.
So you want 6.
Yeah,
Right.
right.
10, 11, 12, 13, 14.
So it's pretty easy, right?
Okay,
Now you don't need to actually do that math because you can just do these conversions. Like it's there for you. Bin, oct, and hex.
Bin,
And hex, yeah. Bin, oct, and hex. Bin octal is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 10, 11, 12, etc.
And bin set or binary. Right?
What's that?
Binary converter equals bin, octal,
Oct. Oct, yeah. Oops.
converter equals octal. And these are already built in.
Uh-huh.
And then what else was it? Bin, oct,
And hex.
hex is a 6, right?
No, hex is 16. Now that's what's so weird about it. This is why we actually have to use extra digits. You see in hex after 9 comes A.
After 9 comes there, okay.
What?
Hex is 16.
Hex is 16.
And it's just called hex, or is this a short name?
Yeah, it's short for hexadecimal.
Hex
Hexadecimal.
equal converter, right? It's converter also.
Yep. And that's, yeah, hex. Hex is a little weird because you need extra single digits to represent the numbers 11 through 15. Yeah, maybe you want to write this down.
Can we get the top half now? I've got the bottom. Is everybody else?
What's that?
Yeah, that's perfect. Alright. We should write this down for sure.
I think you should write it down. I'm going to pause the tape.
Alright, thanks.
My pleasure. This is actually kind of working. Hold on, sorry.
I got the bottom half. Do you everybody else at the bottom half? Yeah, that's all we need.
You need the bottom half?
No.
So in order to do the next step, I'm going to start a new program. It's going to be similar, but I'm going to call it IP converter. And I'm going to ask the user to input an IP address this time. So go ahead and do that if you would.
IP converter. But what did we name the last one? Just a bin calculator?
I call it a bin converter, yeah.
A bin converter. Okay.
Or call it binary converter. Got this one? All right.
And then you want to do a new one, right?
Yeah. So I'm just going to go ahead and print that. I guess I don't need to print IP. We know what a raw input returns, right? Hold on, let me call this column. Now, if they, I'm going to print IP. I mean, I think you know what an IP address looks like.
Oh, yeah, there's some dots.
Yeah, the dots, exactly.
Yeah. Are you going to do raw input? Are you working in 2?
What's that?
You're doing raw input, or you're working, I think you had 3, so.
I'm going to work in 2. I've got both, just like you do. I'm going to use 2 because they told us to use 2, and some of us are working in 2, so let's just use in 2. If it was in 3, it would be, yeah.
So I'm going to sign.
Okay. Now our IP address has dots in it, And this will give us a chance to, what we want to do is work with those values in the IP address separately. So if I put in 127.0.0.1, I want to see each number separately. And what the exercise is asking us to do is to convert each number to binary. So what we need to do is divide this IP by dots. We want to divide the IP by dots, and we're going to learn about a couple of new things. Now we know that IP is a string, right? We know that IP is a string because we typed it into raw input. So it doesn't matter what we type into raw input, it's still going to be a string. What we need to do is treat it like a string, and we're going to divide it up into pieces. I'm going to show you something called split. So I'll say, I don't know what to call them, values equals IP.split, and then we put the dot as an argument. I just want you to type this and show me what you got. Oh, 55 doesn't work too well. In fact, if you would, print the type of values.
List.
Right. And this is a new kind of object, the list object. When you print it, actually, this is what a list looks like, and you can usually identify a list by just the way it looks. What you're seeing in the list is a sequence of values separated by commas. The commas are just notation. They're not really there. What it's trying to show us is 4 items. If I told you that what you're seeing in blue here is 4 items, what would you say the first item was? What type of object does it look like?
String.
Looks like a string, yeah. This is a list of 4 strings. This is a list of 4 strings.
So what is IP value equals IP.split, and we got this stuff.
Yeah. So what we're going to do is, we split divides a string on a delimiter. Here, a period.
And what is this? Is this a command? Would you call
We'd call this a method.
it? A method. And this is exactly how it's set up, right?
Mm-hmm. Because IP is what type of object?
Okay, print IP is raw input.
Came from raw input. So it comes from what type is it? Int, float, or string?
It's a string.
It's always a string from raw input, yeah. Split is a string method, meaning that it's, yeah.
It has a dot split, or is it?
So the way you do any kind of method, didn't we do methods a little bit last week? I'm not sure. Uppercase, we did string.upper. Remember that?
A little bit.
Well, let me show you, just quickly, let me show you a couple of methods. X equals hello. Y equals x dot upper. And if I print y, I'm going to see hello. Remember this one?
Yeah.
X was a string, and we called the string method upper.
Is this on your website?
Yes.
Okay. Is this on the first site?
This is the second section.
Second one, I haven't done this yet, but it makes a little bit more sense when I get there.
Well, I mean, do you see what it's doing?
X hello, y equals x dot upper.
Right?
Call the string method upper on the string.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so print y, just makes everything capital.
It produces a new string where everything's capitalized. Yeah.
Right, so a equals x dot count.
Yeah. So X is what type of object?
Hello.
Hello, but what type?
String.
String. And you see what I've got in the count, in the parentheses to count is an L, right?
No.
So does it make sense why I'm seeing 2
Count.
in A?
L. And hello.
It's counting the L's.
Yeah.
That's right. So what count does is it tells you how many times you can find a string within another string. That's just what count does.
String within another string.
Yeah, this string L, I mean, you can see I'm passing a string to count, right?
Yeah.
That's a string, and that has an L in it.
Okay.
If I put LL, I'd get back 1. If I put an E, I would get back 1. If I put an X, I'd get back 0.
Okay.
Because it's just doing the counting for me. It's just what count does.
It has to be in quotes, right? It can't just be in just the parentheses. It has to be.
No, because if you gave it that, it would think variable X.
Right, okay.
That's what Python would think. So it needs to be a string.
And that's that way it doesn't make a letter.
Yeah, it's just looking for a string within another string.
Does it help like if we read like books on Python and stuff? Like,
Yeah, that can help. Or you can look at my slides and watch my videos.
is that the same thing as like reading a book?
It depends on your learning style. If you like a book better,
Well, some of these things would be nice, like kind of be broken down. But if you're breaking it down right now, so it's perfect.
well, it's there in the slides for sure.
But, okay.
You'd have to go through the slides though.
Right, I'm just reading a lot of material.
I know. It's a lot of material. My slides try to break it down to be very, very small as much as possible. Because when you read a book, it tells you a million things.
Right.
My slides try to give you just what you need.
Okay, for beginners.
For beginners, yeah.
Okay.
But I mean, in order to use the slides on your own, you watch the videos, you got to do a lot of figuring on your own as well, which is true anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, you could sit in class and, yeah, exactly. And then that's what the exercises are for. You want to do the exercises and say, okay, I understand how to do this. This is why I want your email address, because I'm going to, when I finally get that quizzing app up. Anyway, okay. So this is methods. This is what methods are. They're called on a string using dot notation, x dot upper, x dot count. So whatever the method is, we're basically working with that string. We're saying the string hello, okay, let's uppercase hello. We'll say x dot upper. That's the notation that we use.
That's how that works. So we use that.
When you want to call a method on a string,
You want to call a method on a string. That's how you do it.
yeah, it's kind of like a function, but it's called on the object itself.
Method.
And we call it a method, yeah. It's like a method is like a function, but for one type. Yeah. So obviously you wouldn't have an integer dot upper, right? That doesn't make any sense. And so there is none. There's only a string dot upper.
Okay.
So now what about split? Split is a method for what type of object?
Split.
A string, yeah.
A string.
How do we know it's for strings? Because I'm calling it on IP, and IP came from raw input. We also know because I'm telling you, but you can also look at this code and see that it's a string method.
Right.
And we get back this new type of object called a list. And you see how it worked.
Okay, that's a list.
Now, can you see what split did?
Split. Gave you. It split at the dot. I split the IP at the dots.
At the dots, that's right. That's right. At the dots. So what Python did was it went, okay, I'm looking for a dot here. Okay, found a dot. Let's make that the first item. See how 127 is the first item, right?
You just make this IP up, right? It's not a real IP.
This is the localhost IP. This is actually the IP of your own computer.
Oh, okay.
I just used it as an example, yeah.
That's your IP?
That's everybody's local IP.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's your local IP too. And then it sees the dot, and so it goes, okay, that's the item, 127. Then it goes on past the dot and it sees a 0, and then it gets to the next dot and it says, okay, that's the next item.
Yeah.
So clearly, if I were to run it again and give it some other, it's splitting on the dots, right? But let me ask you this then. If I run this and I give it 127.0.0.1, now you tell me, because you have to understand what split is doing. It's looking through for the delimiter.
Right.
What if I were to change the delimiter to a 7 and give it the same input? What am I going to see?
Error I think so.
12, 0, 0.
What if the delimiter was actually the character 7?
Split at 17, split at 7, right?
Right, so how many items would I have back in the list?
Just 2.
6.
It's going to look for the 7. It's going to go 1, 2, then it's going to see the 7 and go, there's the delimiter. Great. I'll make 1, 2 in an item, and then it'll keep going looking for a 7. It's not going to find one. Oops. Why did that not work? Because I didn't save. 2 items. 1, 2, then it split on the 7, and then it went on looking for a 7, never found one, and so it didn't do any more splitting. All right, let me ask you about this then. Let's say I put in a dash, and let's say my input was, darn it, wait, I want it to clear. Where's my bottom? Oh, shit, hold on. Oh, there it is, that's what I wanted. Oh, I see, it's doing other stuff too. Give me 1 second. Totally got this. Okay, so now let's say I gave it a date. This is a pretty standard date. The question would be this. Now don't answer right away. Think about it for just 1 second. How many items would I get back given the split character and given my string? Think about it for a second. Don't say it out loud. Everybody got it? How many items?
3.
The 3, right. Okay, so that's how split works. And split is good for doing IP addresses because IP addresses, if you need to split the IP, you can just split on a dot if you want to.
I got a question.
Yeah.
So we removed the dash and then it became the dot. Does it always do that? Like for example, earlier the 7 disappeared and then returned to a dot. Does it always do that?
Yeah, apparently it's always doing that, right? If I put the delimiter in, you're going to see that it removes the delimiter.
Oh, it becomes a comma. Okay.
No, it doesn't become a comma because if I do, let's say I do the dash, it's not so much that it becomes a comma, it's that the list is a special kind of object that has items in it. This is just showing us, it's just syntactic. It's saying here are my items. Like this is how a list shows itself. Yeah, if I wanted to make, I can make my own list. If I wanted to make a list of 3 integers, I would do that. There's a list of 3 integers. I use the comma to just separate them. That's just to indicate that those items are there. All right. So what do you think so far? That makes some sense, right? Oops, that didn't. Now you see why I only got 1 item there? There's no dash, right? Okay, so that's how split works. All right, so then the next thing that we want to look at is what we can do with a list. And I'm going to show you, let's see what we need for this assignment. For this particular assignment.
The list is for the list, right?
What's that?
Oh, list and double.
God, this is such an annoying, it's so annoying. Anyway, it's like the person that wrote the assignment didn't understand how Python works. It's so weird. They did it some other way that like makes them look like a C programmer. But anyway, okay, so we have our items. Now what I want to show you is how we can get different separate items from a list. Let's say that we have this list 127.0.0.1, and I've got these, how many items? 4. Now if I want to get the first item out, which we could maybe call first, I can say value subscript 0. And if I print first, I'm going to see just 127. So you see that square bracket 0? Subscript, we call it a subscript, or we also call it an index. Let me ask you this. You know what type IP is, right?
Yeah, sure.
And what type is values? What do we call that? We got back this. Do you remember what we called this? Or when I looked at the type, what? A list object. We call this a list object. Now you want to think of it as a list object. Split returns a list of strings. Split returns a list of strings. What does split return? List of strings, that's right. And how many strings are in this list?
4.
There are 4, yeah. Now if I have a list, any list at all, if I have a list and I want to get an item from the list, I can use this syntax. Because values is what type of object?
You want to get an item from a list.
Values came back from split, so what does that make values? What type of object? Well, when split splits a string, it gives us back what? Remember what we said this was? What is that?
That's a list.
A list of strings, that's right. And that's what I got when I printed this. Right. So what does split return? A list of strings, that's right. So what type is values?
A list of strings.
It's a list of strings, that's right. All right, now I'm going to hide it. And I'm going to bring it back. What type does split return?
A list.
A list of strings, that's right. Split always returns a list of strings. You want to do it again? I'm going to ask you again in 5 minutes.
Okay.
And I want to see if you can remember.
Split returns a list of strings.
Split returns a list of strings. Now, when you have a list, you can select individual items in the list using a subscript. You see I'm printing value 0? I'm printing first. Let's go over it again. First came from value 0. What type is values?
A list of strings.
Right. So value 0, I don't know if you've heard about counting from 0. But when we count in computer science, we count from 0.
Okay.
The first item is 0.
Right.
Always starts at 0. And so when I want the first item, 0. So what if I wanted to get the last item? What if I wanted to get that 1? What would I change this to get that 1 in that list? See, I've got a list.
1. You change to 1.
How would I get this last item? If this item here is 0.
And the first one is 0.
First
you
one.
do 4.
So what is this one?
4.
Why don't you count from 0? Right here. What's that? 0?
Yeah.
What's that?
2.
0 to 2?
Well, you have 0, 1. That's 0, 1.
0, 1, yes. And then
That's 2. And that's 3. Sorry.
0, 1,
I
2,
do, like, it's 4
3.
things.
Right. So if I want to get the last one, it's 3. Good.
Very good, 3.
No, that's good. That's fine. All right. No, this is the first time. 127.0.0.1. Part 1, yeah.
Alright.
All right. So did you guys type this out? Yeah. You're doing great.
Wait, I'm at values, right?
Values is what type of object?
This is one return strings.
A list of strings, right. And if you want to get any item, so here's what I would have you do. Did you guys type this out?
Almost.
Could you go ahead, let's do a first, second, third, and fourth. So I'll do the first one.
First equals. Wait, is this also another?
So you guys go ahead and fill in the blanks. Do the other 3 so that we can see when we print first, second, third, fourth, we should see each one.
No, we do this first. Is that like is that a command or is that a?
No, that's just a variable name.
It's a variable name.
I just named it that myself.
And then equals values to these brackets that we have.
Yeah. We call that a subscript.
Is that a function?
No, it's kind of like a function in that it's getting something from the list. So it's kind of like a function in a way.
Okay, so it's getting something, it knows what values is. So where's the only values, right?
What's that? Yeah, what's that?
Like how does that work?
Okay, so it's all a handoff. Raw input returns a string, right?
Huh?
Raw input returns a string, right?
Yeah.
So then this is how you read it. You look at raw input, you say, okay, that returns a string. Then you say, okay, I'm taking the string and splitting it. That returns a what?
A list of strings.
That's right. And so now when I say value subscript 0, that's premised on the idea that I know values is a list, and I can get the first item using a square bracket.
That's how you say value subscript 0. That's how
That's what you say. That's right. That's right.
Subscript where.
You could say subscript 0. I'll say with index 0 because we sometimes call it an index. The index.
We didn't learn how to use that.
What's that?
We didn't learn how to use that.
No, this is the first time.
Okay, we're trying to do that, right? Okay.
Yeah.
So this is basically task view.
This is the first time we use this.
Alright.
So can you do the others to get second, third, and fourth?
Yeah, 1, 2, and 3.
Right. Go ahead and do that. Give me 1 second. Hold on. Fucking ignoramuses. It's so annoying. Why are they so stupid? I hate them. I hate them. Huh? Anything interesting going on?
I like how you got your screen set up. You got the terminal on the bottom,
Yeah.
and did it like get set up with that, or is it like just set up to open up like that?
No, I just moved the windows around.
Okay. Then just submit line.
Well, PyCharm set it this way too. Oops. So just completing the program, this is allowing us to take an input that's an IP address, split it into pieces, and then print out the pieces. Now that last print statement's a little weird with the parentheses. I guess it's because I'm in Python 2. I forget that my print statements don't need parentheses. I'm just seeing each one printed separately. Okay. Yeah, not in Python 2, they don't.
No, okay, Python 2.
In Python 2, they do not need parentheses, although
Space,
they,
right?
just a space, yeah, it's a statement rather than a function. So now the last part of this first exercise is to convert each one of these values into binary. Now, you remember how to convert something into binary?
With the calculator, binary calculator.
Well, yeah, you've written your binary calculator, but when you look at the binary calculator, what particular statement will take an integer and convert it to binary? The bin function. The int function is converting to integer, and the bin function is converting to binary.
How come it's not highlighted or anything?
I don't know. Why isn't it blue?
Yeah, like, why isn't it any color?
Bin?
Yeah.
I'm not sure, but it has some. It's just the IDE. It's just Sublime.
Right?
Yeah, it works. Actually, let me try Python 3 to make sure. Yeah, it's still there. It's just the IDE got confused. Don't worry about it. The IDE just got confused. All right. So the question would be this. If you know that int converts to an integer, and you know that bin converts an int to a... Actually, will bin work with a string? Let's try it. No. Oh, wait. Huh. If you know that you can convert a string to int with int function, and you know you can convert an integer, a regular decimal integer, to a binary with the bin function, can you make it so that each one of these IP integers is converted to binary? Let's talk about what you would have to do. Nick, what would you say you'd have to do to value 0 to see it in binary?
You have to convert it to an int first and then convert it to binary.
Right, exactly. So we're gonna move ahead and do that. I'm gonna do it for you because, well, I mean, we could take a short break and you could try it yourselves.
Yeah, can I get a coffee real quick? You guys don't mind?
You want to get a coffee?
Yeah, I just want to get some real quick.
Hold on a second.
Alright.
Then we'll take our quick break.
I'm gonna stand.
You're the one that I want to. You don't like to sit for too long.
Yeah, I don't like it.
All right.
I like games, but I do that.
So before we take our break, here's my solution. Converting each one to integer first. Okay, so basically, if I take value 0 and I wanted to convert that to an int, I would just pass it to int, right? The way you want to read this is, ask yourself what each thing is, what the value and the type is. So what type is IP? Let's just read it from the top. String. And split returns what? What's values? Split, remember it divides it, a list of strings. That's right. That's right. And so value 0, if values is a list of strings and I'm asking for value 0, and value 0 is the first item in that list of strings, right? So what does that make value 0? A string. A string. No, not a list of strings. Value 0 is the first item in the list, right? So it's one string. That's right. And since we started with this, that was a single string with the dots in it, right? Then I did a split. If I did a split, then I get this list of strings. And if I have value 0, what's value 0 then? What's the value? What is actually in value 0? It's a string, but what is the string? What's in it?
A list.
I'm sorry. It's a string. It has 127 in it. That's all I meant. That's what its value is 127.
Yeah, 0 is 127.
So the first item is the first string, right? So I'm converting that to an int here. Now it's an integer, 127.
String. So you're doing like 2 things in one.
And then, well, I'm breaking it down here. Then if I wanted to convert that to binary, I would do that. And that's what you guys did. But if you wanted to just do it all at once, you could do it all at once like this. This is take value 0, convert it to an int. That integer comes back and convert that to binary. And then you get back, that's what first is. So,
Okay, that's all in one.
yeah, in other words, 21 replaces 18 and 19.
Yeah.
All right. Sorry, one more time. Convert this string. Oh, you got it already?
No, I did it in terminal.
Oh, you did it in terminal. So we're converting that string to base 64 using the base 64 library. Base 64 is like base 16 or base 8 or base 10. But it's
import base 64. What is it doing? You're just like importing it?
when you do an import, what you're doing is you're making other Python code available. Some Python code is built in, like int and bin and those things, right? So split and all those things are built in.
Right.
And base 64 is also part of your Python, but in order to make it available, you have to import. That just means that you're taking...
Do it once?
Yeah, once in your program. If you have another program, you'd have to do it there too.
Like Python and Python could be 2 different programs, or?
No. This is a program, a script, the script that you write.
Okay, so each script that I have import base 64 now is good for the rest of the script.
For the rest of the script, that's right. That's right. Imports are just for importing into this program right now, yeah.
Import base 64.
I want to see if I can give you more. Did you do it yet?
Yeah, I'm just saving import.
You guys did it?
I don't know what it is.
What to do? Do this. And then print Y.
Print Y, okay.
I'll be right back.
This is GR314, WOR7.
So I think it's trying to make the
Hey,
3 is supposed to be an E, The 4 is supposed to be an A. The 0 is supposed to be an O. I don't know how the 7 is supposed to be a K, but so they're just trying to be cute. Oh, they are trying to be cute.
I'm getting.
What are you getting? An error? The error says incorrect padding. Like error message. Wait. Script. It's just this. It just needs an X. Okay. 3 I Z N F Q G D Z B S N Y E equals.
Yeah. Why did you say the code?
Doesn't work for me.
The code's not working?
Yeah.
Did you say it?
Yeah. Did it?
Wonder why that is.
Tribute error.
That equal sign is a padding.
Tribute error.
I just must have misspelled it. Let's say decode. This is for B64 decode. Are you in Python 2 or 3?
I'm doing it in both. I'm just getting both of it. Same. Oh wait. Yes, still the same.
And I mean, when you run it as regular Python, what do you just do? Python space?
Yeah, still the
Just say
same.
Python space and then dash capital V so I can see make sure verify that it's Python 2. Okay. And let's look closely at your method call again. It says no 64 decode, B64 decode, module object. So let's look again. Import base64. Y equals base64, B64 decode. I don't have an answer. I don't know. That looks like exactly what I wrote. What's yours?
I'm gonna do this right here. That's what you wanted, right?
So you're running? Oh, great work.
Yeah.
So what's wrong with your version of Python, Nick? How come you must install it wrong? I was kidding. I don't know. There's something weird going on. I don't know what it
You're
is.
Python 2 or Python 3?
I'm doing it the same.
It should be
See,
working.
I'm right, Python 2, you do Python import.
I mean, still doing the same thing. Even the Python 3 and Python 2.
I thought you said you did it from the terminal and it worked.
Yeah, I mean, I did it at Echo in the base64 in the terminal. I did it in Linux, not in Python. Wait, what am I doing? Import base64.
Oh. Oh, wait a second. Can I ask you one question? Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is a DOS attack. And denial of service is what DOS stands for. Denial of service, right? You all know that?
Yeah.
Denial of service means I'm going to occupy your server and you're never going to be able to use it because I've taken up all the ports. We talked about this last week. Last week is, and put import socket at the top actually. Every server has a limited number of sockets. Every server maybe has 100 sockets or maybe 1,000 sockets, but it's probably in the hundreds. And every time a network connection happens, it takes up a socket. So we can put this in. Every server has a limited number of socket connections. If we occupy all sockets, we are effectively shutting down the server's ability to serve. Denial of service. I actually don't even know if this is smart or not. Hold on. I made up the port number. I don't know if port 80 is the, that's standard web port. Port 80 is a web port. This is going to be the first part. Then we're gonna look at range in a minute. Any questions about this? Let's see what happens when I run this. Well, it didn't error out. I'm going to try printing done after this. So it didn't error out, which means to me that it connected. Now the connection was momentary, but watch closely when I run this. Do you see the second lag? If I take out the connect here, it probably won't lag at all. See that?
What? I don't want to see that. See what?
Well, when I run it, there's no lag. Do you see how it just comes right back? Now watch what happens when I take out, when I comment out or uncomment the connect. Watch this. See that? It's taking a second. See that?
What does that mean?
It means that when I connect, it actually has to make a network connection. It's momentary, but you can see it actually takes a second to go across the network.
Hey, let me stop you every day. So is this supposed to have to be all capital?
Well, it doesn't have to be, but I set it up as all caps, so yes.
Okay.
Because I defined it as all caps. I'm gonna change next to next IP. I'm sorry to change things for you, but actually you could just say host equals and give it.
I mean, when you do port, is that like a thing? Is that like something? Is that a function or something? Is that something happening over there, right?
Well, what type of object is port?
No, we haven't gone through this yet, but I can go back to
You should be able to tell by looking on line 9. What type is port?
ports, a integer.
Integer, right. So when we and host is what type of object?
Host is an IP address, so that's a float.
Isn't it the bar?
It's got quotes around it.
Okay, it's string.
String.
Yeah.
So when we connect, we're passing it a string and an integer. Do you see how we're passing connect a string and an integer?
What line are you on?
Connect. Line 11.
Oh,
Line 11.
I'm passing it host and port. See that?
Yeah, you're doing the host. Why do you have two parentheses?
Actually, it makes it look like I have to pass it a tuple. Let's try it without the parentheses. Yeah. You have to pass it. You can probably pass it a list too. Let's pass it a list. No, it must be a tuple. So there's a couple of new things to bring up with this. One is the tuple, which I'll explain in a moment. We have to have the second parentheses because we need to pass it a tuple. I'll explain what a tuple is in a minute. Other questions about this?
Is it the same as DDoS?
As what?
A DDoS.
What's a DDoS?
Gotta name it.
Which line? You're saying something on the code here?
I'm guessing it's the same.
What are you talking about?
It's an attack, like those. But
Oh, what's a DDoS attack?
Yeah.
What is that? Sorry. So going line by line, any import means I'm making other Python code available. I'm making other Python code available to myself, my own. So what did we import last time? We imported base64. So the base64 library is a bunch of functions related to base64 conversion. The socket library, which we also call the socket module, is code that's related to making network connections. So all you have to know is that when you want to do network connections, you're going to import socket, because socket has a bunch of functions for you to use to do socket stuff. Any questions about that?
Yeah, is this function, this called a function you said, socket is a,
Well, when we say socket's a library or module, it's also known as a module.
so it does something as well.
Actually, I should probably call it the socket module and otherwise known as a library. It's called a library because you're basically checking out these functions to use. It's like checking out a book. You're checking out these functions to use. So that's what it means when we say import. And socket is the library for doing socket stuff. And when we say, yeah?
So somebody like created this library to do certain things, is that like a code in itself? It's like a,
Yeah, it's like other Python code.
okay, so
It's-
socket's a code made in Python.
It's other Python code that we're using in our code.
And it's called socket.
That module is called socket, yeah.
And this is like the last one was
Base 64.
base64.
Yeah.
Also,
That was other Python code.
other Python.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Alright.
So when we say next IP is a string, IP addresses are always going to be expressed as strings because you need to be able to say it's this dot that. So that we call that I mean we use a string for that
Why? Why can't we just use a float? Or
because a float only has one decimal point.
how about those containing there's no more than one decimal in float ever?
No,
So you combine two floats, or like 3 floats.
I mean potentially you could try to make it work that way, but basically an IP is really a string.
Okay, and I do string.
Because it's some digits followed by a dot followed by some digits followed by a dot.
Okay.
We just express that as a string. It's not, yeah. So I'm calling it next IP, but I may as well just call it host. So I'm just going to call it host. You don't have to. I just realized that making it a separate variable is kind of stupid. All right.
Why
So
did you delete that?
what?
Why did you delete the next IP?
Because as you can see, if I make next IP this string, right, and then I say host equals next IP, what type of object is host?
Variable.
Huh?
Variable?
No, when I say what type of object, I mean int float or string list.
Ah, string.
It's a string. It's the same string, right?
Yeah.
So I didn't really need to make two variables out of it. I've got two variables now that have the value 1.100.250. I've got two of them now. I don't really need two of them. I'm just saying that this one string,
Yeah.
which we've labeled next IP, I then in the next line say, okay, also make host pointed at that.
Okay.
So why two? I don't really need two variables, right?
So what are you gonna do?
So I'm just gonna make host the value itself.
Okay,
You don't need to change anything. It works the same way. I just never needed to call it next IP.
okay.
All right. This is the next IP address, whatever next is, like the next server. I don't know what it is. Anyway, it's an IP address, and you know what an IP address is, right?
Yeah.
So then the port, every server has multiple port connections, but it only has a limited number. I'm choosing to hit it on the port 80. Port 80 is actually a default for web server. So normally the web server, for example, I mean, I don't know if you're aware of this, but when you go onto a web server, you can put in an IP address. Let's see where we get. So there's nothing there. If you're the owner of this website, contact your hosting provider. All right, so it didn't, but what I did was I basically went to that IP address on my browser, but here I'm doing it with my own Python program. In other words, this is a bit of a digression, but you understand that when you're making a browser request, when you click on a link or you type an address, you're making a network connection. You're connecting on port 80. The Google server's port 80, the Yahoo server's port 80, the Rockstar Games web server port 80. They're all port 80. Every website you go to is connecting on port 80. And we can connect ourselves using socket in the very same way. Anyway, so we're connecting on that port. And when we say socket.socket, It's a little confusing when it's the same name, but when we say socket.socket, we're using the socket function of the socket library, the socket function of the socket module.
Okay.
So it's just
Dot socket is the function, right?
dot socket's the function. That's right, exactly. Now, when we say inet and sockstream, I don't know what those values are, but those are what we call constant values. We could actually find out what they are by just printing them.
What's a sock string?
I don't know. And that should underscore for you the fact that when we use these things, sometimes we don't always know what they are. I don't know what a sock stream is. A networking person could tell you. I don't know what AFINet is. A network person could tell you. We could also look it up online. But the point I want to make about this, though, is that we don't really need to know. There are certain things that we just plug in there because we know that they work. And so we just do that. You know, what we've done by creating a socket is we've got a special object now in S. We could find out what type that object is, actually. It's probably a socket object. It's class socket socket. All right, fine. Again, you don't actually need to know that much, but conceptually, all you need to realize or think about is that we create a socket object and then we connect with it. You see how we're saying s.connect?
Yeah.
That's a method of the socket object. What's a socket object? I don't know. It comes back from socket.socket. I get this object back and I can connect with it. That's how we think about it. Now, a networking person could go into detail on exactly what a socket object is. It's clearly an object that lets you talk to the socket. I don't really know the details there, and I don't even need to know, because I know that if I use this code and if I supply the host and the port, I'm going to make a connection. That's all I need to know. It's very easy to make a network connection in Python. We use the socket object and we do this. Now maybe later we need to learn like that maybe sometimes you need to use a different value here. I don't know. All I know is that this works the way I need it to right now to connect to this server. No problem. We pass it this host port and we're going to finish the connection. And it's connecting for us. Now, we're not doing anything with it. And that actually isn't even needed, because a denial of service attack is just about connecting repeatedly. Just keeping the thing busy by constantly connecting. So we're going to need to do two things. The first thing we're going to do is I'm going to introduce to you what a tuple is. This is a tuple. And just be able to identify that. And the second thing is I'm going to show you how to do the same thing repeatedly over and over and over again, which is an important skill when you're doing a DOS. That's a tuple. I'll show that to you in a moment. We'll take a short, we're not going to take a break. We're not going to leave. I've got you till 2:30. Right? Oh, yeah, 2:30. So we're going to do a joke break if anybody knows a joke. Does anybody know a joke? All right, I'm not telling the joke on the recording because it was dirty. All right, so do you remember what a list looks like?
Yeah.
That's a list of ints. That's a list of what?
Strings.
List of strings, right. All right, now let me show you what a tuple is. It's a tuple of ints, and here's a tuple of strings. A tuple is just like a list. Do you remember how we get the first item out of a list? Remember that syntax?
No, list 0.
List and square brackets and 0. And you can do the same thing with a tuple.
So tuples are in parentheses?
Yes, tuples are in parentheses.
And lists are in brackets?
Are in square brackets, that's right. So if I wanted to get the second item out of this tuple, I would say z subscript 1.
Are we copying this stuff down?
No,
No?
you can, but I just want to let you know about it. I mean, you can recognize what a list is, square bracketed list, and you recognize what a tuple is, parenthetical list, parenthetical sequence. We don't need to know too much more about that, except that lists you can actually make bigger. You can expand a list, but you can't expand a tuple.
Wait, can you say that again? List is a, what is a list again?
A list is a sequence of objects that can be expanded. Tuple, a sequence of objects that cannot be expanded.
What do you mean when you say expanded?
Well, let me show you. Y dot append 4, Y dot append, hello, print Y. 1, 2, 3, 4, hello. Let me just save this. So do you see how I expanded Y? When I print Y on line 7?
Yeah.
Do you see what happened to Y?
Wait, did you run that?
I didn't, but it'll work.
Print Y. Under X, Y dot append. What does append do?
You tell me, look at what happened to Y.
And for
Now do you see what Y is now? If I print Y here, so you see when I printed Y, I got 1, 2, 3, right? It makes sense because that's what's in it, right? Okay, now look what happened to Y when I printed it on line 7.
Y pen for Y pen, hello, you got print Y, and you added those append, because like you're just like adding them.
Yep.
So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, hello. 1, 2, 3, 4, and hello.
It expands the list. Think of it as like an accordion folder, and you can just keep adding items and it'll keep expanding. Does that make sense?
Okay, and you just keep adding things to Y,
Right,
or anything.
right.
All right, that's what append does. Yeah.
But you can't do that with a list. I mean with a tuple. You can't do that with a tuple.
Okay, and only,
Tuples don't do that.
You
Okay.
have that on your website as well, right? Append tuple?
No, you can't append to a tuple.
Oh, but you have that on your website, like definition of what they do?
Yes,
Append tuple, okay.
yes. Yes, I do. Now, when you look here, what does that look like to you? This, comma, that, inside parentheses.
That's a host and a port inside the S connect.
But no, just this part.
Is that tuple?
That's a tuple.
Okay.
So this works, but see, now watch what happens when I try to make Z into a list. Because what this host port is doing is, it's passing a 2-item container with those 2 values in it. But if I run this, see what it says? Must be tuple, not list. So it's actually asking for a tuple. It's asking for a tuple. So if we make it a tuple, it'll be okay. So that tells me that connect requires a tuple.
And that's all you gotta do to make it a tuple, just put parentheses around it, an object.
Well, it depends. If you want to convert an existing object to a tuple, you can use the tuple function. And that'll give us a list. A tuple, rather. So you can convert to a tuple this way, too. All right, there's only one more step before we can do our DOS, and then maybe we'll take a slightly longer break. Any questions about this?
So a tuple you cannot append.
That's right. That's the only difference. But otherwise, it acts a lot like a list. I know it's a lot, but we need to know all these things in order to be able to do this. And this is answering the question you had the first week, which was, when do we get to the hacking?
Right.
Right, so we're getting to the hacking. But in order to do that, we need to know all these different little things. I got one more thing for you. Do this with me if you would. Let's make a new file. And let's do something multiple times. And then when we get through this, we'll do our DOS, and then we can take a little bit of a break.
Okay.
All right.
What are we gonna call it?
Let's call it range.py.
Now, when you try to do save, how do you go directly to that folder? When I try to do save, I kind of go to home and then go into intro Python and then script. I don't hear like it directly all over.
Saving in the right place. What are you using, Atom?
I am.
You can't just create a new file and save it, and it saves in the same directory? That's just your editor. It's just how your editor is working. Go ahead and run this. Like I said, after we do this, we'll take a break. We're going to need this code in the other program so that we can do a DOS. Because remember, a DOS is a continuous reconnecting onto ports. Connect, 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 connect. This is a for loop. We did look at a for loop before, or did we? No, maybe we didn't. No, we did not. We looked at a while loop. Sorry, let me just look at one thing really quickly. Oh, it's doing a port range. Whoops. Is it doing a port range? For I in range F port, T port. Uh-oh. Oh, shit. Oh, it's more complicated than that. We're going to do the host, and we're going to do port connects.
Oh, nice. So when I save that, we just changes my header.
Save it with a PY?
Yeah.
It changes the colors?
Well, it changes the, you know, I don't have to go in and change the text editor to the language.
Right, when you save with a PY.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's another good reason to save it as PY, because the editor responds to that.
Right. I have to do two things there. Save it and change my header to the file.
Well, I mean, it's not actually changing the file. It's just the editor sees the PY and goes, oh, I'm supposed to color it this way.
Right.
Yeah. So the editor helps with the editor too.
I have to like change every new file to Python.
Just save everything with a PY and that's it. Yeah. It's just identifying it as Python.
Well,
So are you getting this? Did you do it?
yeah. You want me to run it?
Yeah, run it. Go ahead and run it. Are you getting 5 highs? Okay.
I've got file range syntax error, invalid syntax.
Well, then just look at your syntax.
Item for range in file.
You just compare what you've got to what I've got.
For item in range 5. Yeah, I've got
Something missing.
just
Make me come over there. There's something missing. Sorry, I'm just kidding. There's something missing. Like their quote.
That was what is it called? The dots. The dots
The
right
colon.
after
Okay, the colon.
Yeah.
Colon. You guys got it?
Why do I need colons?
Because that's the syntax for looping.
Huh?
That's the syntax for
That's
for
the right
looping.
way of using it?
Yep. So that's right. That's the right way to use it. So what we're doing with a for loop is for loop loops over whatever, however many whatevers. You can for loop over the lines in a file. You can loop over a list. I can put in a list here. Oops.
Maybe for loop.
So what a for loop is it's what we call an iterating loop. See, I got 1, 2, 3. For looping, basically, what we do in computer science, like all the time, is we basically take each one in turn of whatever thing we're working with. We might have a list of integers. We might have a list of port numbers. We might have a list of IP addresses. We may have a file with lines in it. There's lots and lots of things to iterate over. And one of the main things that computer programs do is iterate, meaning it's just going to go over each one. Do you see how it printed each one in turn? 1 and then 2 and then 3. But what am I printing there? See how I'm printing item? So item was 1 and then item was 2 and then item was 3. How did that happen? This for loop basically assigns 1 to item, then prints it, then assigns 2 to item, then prints it, then assigns 3 to item, and then prints it.
So you guys, you have to do it, you keep calling it for loop, right? You keep calling it for loop.
For loop.
How do you spell that?
F-O-R. For, and then loop. L-O-O-P.
For.
A for loop. All right, let's just write it then.
For loop. With a loop? With a P? It is a loop. Okay.
Yeah.
For loop. But if you're using for in, you're using for item in.
You say in, yeah. You say for item in. In meaning, is basically saying for each one of these, do this. The do this is lines 6 and 7. For each one of these, do this. Let's say for each one of these, we just wanted to print hello. We could just say hello. We don't even need to print item. It doesn't really matter what item is. If we want item, great. If we don't, we don't. For each item in this, print hello. How many items in 1, 2, 3? 3 items, right? How many times do we see hello? 3 times. It's executing that block, line 6, 3 times because there are 3 items in.
Now, do you have the space? Do you have spaces on line 6? You want to put before the print?
Yeah, whatever you want. You want to put a space before the hello?
No. Like, you know how you have spaces
You mean like that?
between 6 and print?
Oh, I'm sorry. This is Python 3 syntax. I should say Python 2. Yeah, you can use spaces, yes.
No, but what if it started with print started right where 4 starts, you know? Maybe like backspace it.
Well, you can't put print in front of 4.
No, not in front, but like on line 6.
Yeah.
You know, like how you gave it space before you started typing print?
Yeah.
When you didn't give it space before.
Oh, I see. The indent. Yeah, we call that an indent. And it's a 4-space indent. And it marks the thing that will be done multiple times. So let me print done here. And I'm going to tell you that we're going to see 3 hellos and then a done. 1 done. Why only 1 done? Oh, gotta save it.
What if we don't do the indents? Like,
What if we don't do what?
what if we don't say exactly 4 spaces?
Yes, it must be
Not
4.
5, not 3.
That's right. You're going to hit tab. You're going to hit tab and it's going to insert 4 spaces.
Ah, okay.
That's what Atom will do for you. It's another reason to save as py because then it knows to do that.
Alright, so,
Because you see I'm backspacing over it, there's 4 of them.
okay.
All right, so I see 3 hellos and 1 done. Why are there 3 hellos?
Because you got 3 items?
3 items in the list. I could have 3 anythings. And if I want to work with those items, I can. If I want to work with those items, I can. I also don't need to. I could concatenate item to hello. Hello A, hello B, hello C, hello D. You see why I'm getting hello A, hello B, hello C, hello D?
Yeah.
You can?
Range, yeah.
Why?
Because it's a plus sign right there with the hello item.
Why is item A, B, C, and D?
Because you got 4, you know? You got 4 strings.
Right, because item receives each one of those strings in turn. First item is A, then we execute the block. Then item is B, then we execute the block.
That's 0, right? A would be 0.
A would be the 0, but in this case, we're not working with those indices.
We're not working.
No, we're just saying for loop over all of them.
Okay, gotcha.
Now, when I use a range, I'm basically saying the same thing. Let's see what item is when we print. I don't have to call it item. I could call it my num. Whatever you want to call it is fine. It doesn't have to be item. When we do this, colon. You see after done, I've got 0, 1, and 2. See that? What does that tell you about range?
Alright, so 3 range is just
range is delivering 3 items starting at 0.
Yeah, why do that?
Because that's what range does.
Can
What?
you put a letter in range?
No.
Or like a letter you can't put, it's just
Well, we
based
could
on-
try it. And it'll say range integer end argument expected got stir. So it wanted an integer.
Okay.
So if I say range 5, what do you think I'll see?
You guys 0 to 4.
Right. Okay. So this is an easy way for us to execute the same command over and over and over again. You see where we're going with this? DOS is about executing socket connections repeatedly. So let's now execute our socket connection 5 times.
Good. So could I ever possibly do this to my own socket at home?
Yeah.
Take it down and go try it to yourself?
You mean your own?
Yeah.
Well, you need to have a running server. You need to have a running server. A server is really just a program. It's a program on the other end of the network. It's a program running on another machine on the other end of the network. That's what a server is. It's not an actual machine. It's a program. The program is listening on port 80 or whatever. Actually, I'm wrong. I'm wrong. When we do these connections, we're connecting to a machine, right? But there is one program that's listening on port 80. And so what am I doing now on lines 12 and 13?
12 and 13. You're doing 4 in range. Then the 4 in, you're doing those.
4 in range, right? So what's the outcome? I mean, what am I actually trying to do with lines 12 and 13?
Connecting to Z 5 times or 4 times.
That's right. Connect 5 times, 0 through 4. Yeah. So let's run it and see if we get a big delay when we run it. If it's, what's that? Yeah, mynum. I know. It's, mynum is getting 0 through 4, but I'm not using it. I just want to do it repeatedly, so I'm not even using it. It doesn't even matter, yeah. Yeah, we'll take a break out of this. You kids that have absolutely no stamina at all. Children, sorry. No, we're going to take a break. So actually, it looks like it got through it really quickly. Why don't I just say, I'll just, I'll just say connect. Oh, weird. Socket already connected. Let me do it before. What if I, hold on. Oh, now it's not, now it's okay. I don't know much about network connections. All right. All right. So what are your questions here?
I don't know. No, not one. I'm just going a little fast. That's it.
Well, let me ask you something.
Yeah.
You know what range does, right?
Range gives you, yeah, it's going to give me the range is for the 0 to 5, 0 to 4.
0 to 4, right. And so, and
What
4,
exactly do I define? Is there a definition for range?
that's it.
0 to 4? Or
Oh, you mean how would I define range? Range basically gives you a sequence of integers
sequence of it.
starting at 0.
All right, that's better. Yeah, range is
So the question, I guess the quiz question on this to see if you've got it is, how many times, don't answer right away, how many times is line 14 getting executed? Don't answer right away, just think about it. How many times is line 14 getting executed? Okay, do we all know?
Yep.
What's your answer?
5.
5 times. 5? You got 5? Okay. All right, we can take a break. I'm starving and I had breakfast. It's 1:20. Should we take like a 10, 15? 10 minute?
Yeah, sure.
1:30.
All right.
Great.